Failure is one of the most fundamental part of building one's character and one's understanding of life. Without failure, it's very difficult to achieve true success. The other failure is the failure to understand your limitations. I sold up everything because I bet everything on this plan basically because I was convinced it was going to work. I'm looking for at that time, I said, well, I want $200 a show. They said, look, maybe I can give you like $10, $20 maximum, but we can't afford it. But I was thinking, okay, what is the price of a general price of a show? It's X. So the more shows I make, the more money I make. But the problem is what the broadcast is paying. But if I just stayed with that, stuck it out for another 10 years, it's better to take the risk and fail and learn and try again, basically, than to actually not take the risk and then spend your rest of your life saying, I wish I'd done that idea.
Gary, you are here.
Glad to be.
You walked in so joyfully and you are seated on the couch to talk about your failures. Why did you accept my invitation?
Because I think it's important to talk about failure. Failure is one of the most fundamental part of building one's character and one's understanding of life and understanding one's boundaries, understanding who one is. That's you define things. Things get defined by their limits, and failure is an important part of the process of understanding those limits. And so without failure, it's very difficult to achieve true success, I believe, and I think it's an important part of our life. And I think failure is a much more interesting story than success.
Right?
Success is a boring story.
Successes are boring. Exactly. So let's talk about what failure is to Gary. What is failure to you?
Failure there's two parts to it, basically. The first part of it, which is I think the one that most people kind of get, is that failure is to set out to achieve something and not do that. And to not do that in a way that makes it clear that you weren't going to be able to do it. And that it's clearly your responsibility that you have failed. So, you think, well, I can do this and I should be able to do this. And if I should apply myself to this, I will achieve that. And then you don't achieve that. And so that failure to believe that you can, that you look to achieve things and you don't do it, that I think is the one aspect of failure. I think the other aspect of failure is that it is something that helps define us in that way as well. So it's when you try and reach for something and don't succeed at that, and understand that it's because it's what's the whole thing about your reach exceeding your grasp, basically, or it's the other way around. I'm not sure, but that saying, and so that it's you know what I mean. So so the one failure is a failure in a general sense in your own ambitions. And the other failure is looking at, and it can be from the same thing, but it's looking from different perspectives. The other failure is that failure to understand your limitations.
So growing up, I enjoy exploring this. If the young Gary in your 20s, 30s, and the Gary you are now, I will not attempt to guess your age.
That's very, very
Let's
kind.
just say the wiser version of you.
How
have you evolved in how you assess an outcome, whether it is a fail or not?
Tremendously. I mean, I'm so much more comfortable with it. I think that's why I could walk in here in a very positive way, because I've come to terms with a lot of my failures and understood that what they truly mean. And I think the key thing in what I've learned is exactly that differentiation that I've just spoken about, to understand that the failure wasn't so much that I wasn't good enough to achieve what I'd set out to achieve, is that what I'd set out to achieve was beyond what I was truly able to achieve at that particular point in time. And if I'd actually been more understanding of my limits and what I was able to do, I might not have actually set goals that were beyond me. So I think, and as you go through life, is to try and make things, is to try and create things that are achievable to reach at. So you look for those things. So instead of saying, well, you know what I mean, I'd love to, I can swim a kilometer in the pool, 40 lengths in the pool, so I can definitely do a mid-mile, basically. But the reality is that 40 laps in a swimming pool and swimming a mile across Midmar Dam are two very,
Very
very
different
different
things.
things when
Yeah.
you get into the situation.
Yeah.
And so you need to understand the limits and say, well, no, actually, by the time I can swim maybe 3 kilometers in a pool, I might be close to be able to doing a Midmar mile.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So let's talk about a failure that was a huge catastrophic event in your life and what that has taught you, how you lead, and how you go about, making decisions in business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I was. It's a fairly longish story, but I think it's an interesting one, and it's monumental in my life basically, and it has made a huge impact. But so for many years, I've been in the sports media industry now for just nearly 30 years. I started off basically in the early 90s, producing content, script writing, directing things, and that. I created one of the first ever Pan-African football shows with a colleague of mine back in the late 90s. A guy called Aubrey Tao, who's still doing very, very well.
Yeah.
He's somebody who really managed to ensures that failure just bounces off him all the time
Yeah.
and keeps ploughing ahead. But he's a fascinating character, though. But anyway, we used to work together a lot back then, and we created the first Pan-African football show. Called the African Soccer Show,
Yeah.
and so I moved back into the sports space because I've always been interested in sport and the world of sport, and particularly sport from an African context, beyond even the South African context. So my focus has always been on Africa as a whole in terms of from a sporting perspective. And we started the show, and we did well. And I started being in that space, and then from there I got a position at Supersport. Supersport wanted me to make a similar show to that I was making to Aubrey. With Aubrey, we created a new show called Football Africa, and I was part of the Supersport team. And then in 2008, Imtiaz Patel, the CEO of Supersport at the time, said that he felt that what he was told actually by MultiChoice, that Supersport need to be more focused on the African continent as a whole. They said we are good competition. We had GTV in East Africa and High TV in Nigeria that were buying up all the sports rights and undermining Supersport's position. And they say, we have MultiChoice Africa, but you've got no Supersport. You're sitting in South Africa and you're making this content for the continent. And you have to have a head of it. You've got to have somebody to run the business. And MTS came to me and said, look, you're the guy that I think needs to do that because you know the continent. You've been working across it for years.
Yeah.
So he appointed me head of Africa for Supersport, and it was an incredible job. I got the first thing I had to do was to become an expatriate and relocate with my family to Nigeria for a year, Kenya for 3 years, and it was an incredible job. Rebuilding the Supersport proposition across the continent because we'd lost a lot of the premium rights that we had.
Yeah.
So my focus was working with the African leagues, the football teams, the football leagues in Nigeria and Ghana and Kenya, and building them into new, good television-ready products that could, be valuable in the SuperSport space. And then after 4 years in that role, and I felt that things were changing. High TV and GTV folded, their whole attack and SuperSport folded, and things were kind of drifting back to normal. And I felt that there was a change in the mindset that they suddenly felt, well, now they'd defeated GTV and High TV, that they would actually be in a position they can pull back on the African adventure, as it were.
Who's they now?
SuperSport,
is
DSTV and
Yeah.
the approach. And a lot of the things that I was proposing we should move towards doing at the time, they said, no, we don't need to do that now anymore. And I could feel that it was changing. And I thought that, these guys are wrong. I've got to show them what we need to do. And I think, there's this huge audience for sport out there across the continent. I think that the problem is that a lot of fans can't access sports content because it's behind the paywall and there's a bigger space in the free tier market. I'm going to create a daily African sports news show every day, half-hour sports news, because I knew that I could get content from the various sports and things like that, but I wouldn't have to pay huge amounts of money for rights for that. You don't have to pay all those live rights because it goes under the news format. Created as a news show, and I thought this would be brilliant. Every free-to-air broadcast in Africa would say, this is the thing we've been waiting for. This is going to change our... now we can have news from all the great sports events in the world and sport from Africa as well in our show and on our platform. We're going to love this. They're going to love this. Everyone's going to love this. And I worked out, if I sold a show for about $100 a show, and I could even get 5 broadcasters, so that would cover all the costs. and I worked out the plan for it.
What year is this?
So this is in 2012, and decided to resign from Supersport. I said, okay, well, this is it. I'm resigning. I relocated my family to London because I felt working from London would make a proposition for Africa more effective, because it would be from a neutral point of view. Because I was always used to say, if I stayed in Kenya, where I was at the time, and made it there, then the Nigerians and the South Africans wouldn't take it seriously, because they'd say, oh, it's a Kenyan show.
Yeah.
And likewise, if I did that in Nigeria or South Africa, but from London, and London is a great place because it's very cosmopolitan, and I knew I'd find, many people from the continent, sports people and everything are going through there. There's all the sports people, the African sports people that are in Europe anyway, which are there. So I thought I'd set that up, and then I said, okay, right, now I'm going to find, I need investment to put this thing together. Started going out into the market, and I actually, it took a while and everything like that, and got very, very frustrating, and I thought I was kind of going to the end of the tether, and I'd sold up everything sold all my NASPER shares and everything so that I could relocate my family to London, because I'd bet everything, literally, on this plan, basically, because I was convinced it was going to work.
How were you validating the plan?
Well, I was looking at the numbers in terms of what I needed to put it together. I looked at the potential buyers that I had, the number of free-to-air broadcasters across the continent, and I thought that, as I said, is that if I could get $100 for a show, which is, generally, if you look at any show, it's like, at the time it was going for about $250, $300,
Okay.
But I thought, well, it's, bulk, I mean, if I can get lots of people paying me $100, even $50, if I got 20 broadcasters paying me $50 a show, I'd be more than fine.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of plan that I'd put in place. And I knew as well that there was a huge audience, sports audience on the continent, and that there was... they would, you know what I mean? So there was a need for it. And I knew a lot of them were cut off from accessing the stories and the everyday updates of what was going around the world of sport.
Yeah.
And I knew that we had a unique position as well. So there was that uniqueness about it. So it was a first idea. And I'd based it as well on my experiences with the African soccer shows. So I knew that there would be interest and that we could do that.
So you're talking to investors.
So I start talking to investors, and I find an investor eventually, $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Puts a million. He says, I'll put $1 million into this thing. The guy and he had the money, but he wanted to expand, and he wanted to get into media. He liked the idea a lot. He thought it was a great idea, and he said, okay, I'll put in $1 million for us. And at the time I was thinking, look, I need $2 million. Really, to keep this sustainable, because I know that these things take a while to get going. And I thought the World Cup was coming up in 2014. I thought there'll be a lot of interest. I could get content around that could put in. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I thought, let's take the $1 million and let's get this thing going. And once we get the traction, if we can keep this going for a year, we'll be okay. Yeah, and then everything will start coming in. And so put it all together and started making the show. And I think it was a great show. It was brilliant. I thought, and we did the green screen thing. We created a really good studio. Had some great presenters, good team behind it. And I uniquely got a colleague who used to run Reuters in Africa. Had set up his own wire service. And he had a whole lot of news stringers around the continent. And I said, could your guys do sports for me as well? And they said, well, they don't really know sports, but if you tell them what you're looking for, they could probably do that. So I did a deal with him. And so suddenly I was getting content. So I was getting badminton from Uganda, motocross from Togo,
Nice.
Swimming in Kenya.
Nice.
All these things that people just see the breadth of sport and activity on the continent, that we never ever saw before. And it was really, really good. And I thought, great, now let's take this to the market and take it to the broadcasters and everything like that. And I was going to the free tiers, knocking the door and say, well, here it is. What do you think? And they all said, oh, it's a great show. It looks really, it's good like that. What do you want for it? And I said, I'm looking for, at that time, I said, well, I want $200 a show. They said, $200 a show. I said, how many shows is it? I said, well, it's a daily show. So it's 5 days a week, and then a kind of week, all the top stories of the week wrapped up on a Saturday, basically. So 6 shows a week. I said, okay, $200. I said, look, maybe I can give you $10, $20 maximum for that, basically. But I said, we can't afford it.
No.
That, you know what I mean?
Based on what? How was their value calculation different from
so
yours.
so my valuation, this is the mistake. This is the first of the many mistakes that I made. So this is why it's important, but making these mistakes obviously then went on for me to be very important in my life going forward.
Yeah.
That I learned from that. But this was the mistake. So the thing is that I was thinking, okay, what is the general price of a show? It's X, okay? Then so I'm making, so the more shows I make, the more money I make. But
At X.
at X, yeah. But the problem is that at X, you know what I mean? What the broadcast is paying is not X. It's X times Y, which is the number of shows. So if you're getting a show, so you say, okay, I've got maybe $500 or $1,000 a month to spend on a show.
Yeah.
I'm saying that you do once a week.
Yeah.
So that's $1,000.
Yeah.
Okay, I can afford maybe $40,000 a week, a month basically. But now I'm getting you 6 times 4, that's 24 shows. At, you know what I mean? Suddenly, that's not $1,000 anymore.
Yeah.
That's a lot more.
It's a lot more,
And
yeah.
that's the perspective I didn't see. And suddenly realized that and that we weren't going to get the traction that we weren't. I did a deal with Star Times, the Chinese pay TV, who I ended up working for actually. I helped them build their sports channels because I was doing a bit of work. That was the other thing. I was doing other work I was working for them because I thought, well, I'm not going to take money out of the business because I want the money to go into production. So I took up another work position so I could.
So at this
carry
time,
on.
your family, how is this whole move and everything you're betting on it?
Well-
how is it translating in terms of conversations at home?
Well, no, it was not very comfortable because, I'd left everything behind in a very, very, an expat lifestyle
Yeah.
and everything that I had with it, going with it, as an executive role in a company like MultiChoice Africa and Supersport. It was a very, very good life that we had. And, I mean, well paid, as I said, had shares and bonuses and, everything was covered. Now, I'm paying for this all out of my pocket and everything looked good and rosy and everything kind of happened. And suddenly all these things were falling apart. And, it made for some very, very, very uncomfortable conversations at home.
How was this circling back to your investor? So as I'm thinking about that $1 million, did you get, like, how does this work? I mean, I'm hoping in my future I might talk to you about raising £1 million.
Well, I won't be able to ask that guy, that's for sure. I'll have to find
Forget
someone
the
else.
dollar. We'll go for pound or for the euro.
Exactly.
But how did it work? So the entire, I mean, obviously all the legal contracts are in
Yeah.
place. Your financial projections
Yeah.
are acceptable to the investor.
Well, they look good.
Yeah.
What we did is we set up the business actually in Mauritius. So the bank account and everything was registered in Mauritius. So, which was, so easy to kind of manage. And the idea was he was paying me in tranches. So he didn't say, well, here's $1 million basically.
Okay.
So he said, I think we got 300,000 up front basically to get everything going. And then we drew down another 300. Once we got going, once I got the Star Times contract and signed, okay, look, we're getting some progress here. There was something coming in. And then we got to the point where we said, so what I then realized, but the problem was this again, my realization, it was too late. When we had made the African soccer show, when Aubrey and I had done it back in 2000, we had we had sponsorship from Visa then. What we did then was that we didn't go and sell that show to the broadcasters. We gave it to them for free. Because we had the sponsor. We said to them, here's the show.
Yeah.
It's sponsored.
Yeah.
You take, you know what I mean? You can have the show. You can sell all the other classic advertising around it. Just as
And
it comes,
then it's
it comes
commercially
as
beneficial to
yeah,
them as a station.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the sponsorship covered the costs that we needed to produce the show, and the broadcasters gave the sponsor the reach that he needed. So that was and then I realized, okay, I needed to change that, and I brought a guy on board basically who'd been working at Sony and saying, look, help me try and get this to. But by that stage, you know what I mean, it was too far down the line. And then he was going and knocking on doors of sponsors, and they were saying, well, where's the broadcast? Who's carrying it? Now, because I hadn't succeeded in getting the carriage deals with the thing, so I didn't have the carriages to send. So sponsors saying, so now I had to go back to broadcast. And so now we're running out of time, and now that cash pile is going, we're earning through it. Convince the investors, say, listen, let us give it one last shot at this. Give us the balance, and let keep this thing going for a bit longer. And he agreed, and and then so we pushed it, and then but we still just couldn't get this. When we eventually closed down, the sponsor, we had a couple of sponsors that were very, very interested, and we were close to it. And I do at that point in time, had to decide, okay, do I carry on and let's wait for those sponsors to come on board, or do I pull the plug? My problem with it was that to carry on would mean I have to say to my staff, keep working, but I can't pay you.
Sure.
And I just couldn't do that.
How big was your team at this point?
At that point, we had about 10 people.
Okay.
In working.
I'm sure all across different parts of Africa.
No, so the production was
London.
just in London. It was the team in London, and the stringers that were providing the other content were coming from agencies. So my friend who had the old Reuters thing that hit his agency, so I was paying him a monthly fee for to access his feed or news, and his guys were providing that news.
Yeah.
And then there's a thing called SNTV, Sports News TV, that IMG produced, which is sports news and highlights from globally, basically. So between that and the two, I could cover both the African and the global stories, basically, to create the show the way that I did.
Yeah.
But then the team to make that, because remember it was a daily show, so we had 3 rotating news presenters. We had an editor. I had to hire the cost of the studios we worked from as well. Script writer, my producer, and assistant producer, director, all those. You know what I mean? So that was the kind of all those kind of in the production side of things to make it all happen.
Yeah.
But that was so that was a really, really tough call.
And how were you getting everyone aligned within your team, as well as given that you had an investor? What was your process of getting everyone still to feel committed, to believe in the dream, to believe that however the content is being received, it's a matter of time, because always I guess you live in hope. You live in hope that it's a matter of time before somebody gives you the platforms you're looking for.
Everybody was incredibly behind it. Everybody that was working on that project, in fact, was either African born or African expatriates living in the UK. And so the idea of it was that it was something that they all were 100% committed to. And they believed that we were making a good show. And some of them said, look, we'd be happy to actually keep on doing this for a little while longer without being paid. And I just thought, you say that now, but it's when you coming to work,
it's hard also to live with it.
Yeah,
I'm imagining how difficult
absolutely
it could have been for you.
Yeah. So it's actually quite common. In fact, a lot of companies that do that, where they set up operations and they keep going, and they know that they're running out of money, but they keep going and keep people working until one day people just rock up at the door after like 2 months of being promised, being paid, not being paid, and the place is locked up and they can't go in.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's just an awful way to treat people, basically.
Yeah.
And
do you think your idea was ahead of its time? I mean, now that how many years later are we today?
Yeah, so that was in 2014. It's nearly
like
11
years
ago.
later.
Yeah.
When you look back now, what do you observe in your reflection? What was your summary of being in that situation now, thinking back?
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think right now it would be an absolute, and it still is an absolute winner, because the way that the market has shifted, the way that the streaming platforms have changed things as well, the way that people can actually now share content and access content and distribute content in ways that weren't available at that time. You wouldn't just be stuck going to looking for free-to-air broadcasters.
Yeah.
You could go to a sponsor or a media platform that would say, yeah, great, we've got. So, some of my clients I'm talking to now that I'm working with in my current role in my Sportscape Media is that they have, I'm helping them build sports platforms. And this is something that I've been praying to say, we should, bring it back. And there's a lot of keenness in doing that. And I'm still hopeful that I might actually bring it back. And I kept in contact with the investor for about 6 years.
Did you get
afterwards.
his money back?
No, he didn't get his money back because it blew it all. Where was he going to get it back from, basically? But we kept in contact, and because I kept on trying to look for new opportunities to relaunch it, and I kept him in the loop, and I said, if I get this thing going again, you know what I mean? Your stake is still the same, basically, and if I ever get this money back, I will pay you back this money.
Yeah.
And it still stands today. If I ever get the show going again and it happens and it starts doing well like that, I will make that call one day and say to him, listen, even if I say to him, look, I haven't got all the million, but here's half of it at least, or something, you know. And you're still a shareholder, and whatever happens in going forward, you'll still be part of that. I would do that.
What
Because I
did
still feel so bad about that.
Yeah.
You know?
What did this experience teach you about you? What did you learn about Gary?
The first thing, and then going back to the two things that I was talking about early on. So my first thing was that, you know what I mean, I had everything, and the world let me down, basically. And, you know, didn't respond the way that that it should have responded. This should have been a success. I had it all kind of worked out. But the reflection is that realizing that I had actually done exactly that. You know what I mean? I had tried to exceed my own limitations of what I should be doing and how I could be doing it. And there's a whole lot of learnings. I mean, it's so many learnings that I got out of that. The first real learning was that actually, if you have an idea and what you think the way the thing should work, stick to the original plan. And my original plan was always saying is that to make this work, I needed $2 million to keep this thing going. I should have said, when I'd got the million, I should have said, thanks. Let's put that money down aside. Let's just set up a basic. I could take out maybe $100K to set up a basic team to do a pilot and stuff like that, and sit on that until I'd taken that pilot to the market, and then if I'd got the answers that I found later, I would still have $900,000 there, basically. And then I would have said, okay, right, we've got to change our strategy. And even if I said, let me take another 50 and bring on someone that I can hire to go and speak to sponsors, then I would still have $850,000 when a sponsor came and said, okay, great, we're on board. And then actually spent the money, you know, started building the product rather than spend it.
Build the product to the full extent.
Yeah, exactly.
And then shop it around and see if there's anybody who would love the product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was kind of pushed into it in a sense. Well, I say pushed into it. I was pushed into it because I was being stupid. So it was my own limit. I exceeded my own kind of understanding of what I was capable of. The World Cup was a bit of a red herring because I thought it's coming up and that would be something that people would want to get content around. But of course, by the time we were starting this just before the World Cup in 2014. And the fact is that everybody who had money budgeted for the World Cup had already spent their money. They had planned their plans. You know what I mean? Those budgets are allocated a year before a World Cup, not a month before a World Cup.
Yeah.
So I'd failed to look at all those little details. I was too carried away by the hubris of the idea. I mean, you say, no, it is a good idea, and it is still a good idea, and it is a good idea. But just that the execution of it and the time and everything like that was wrong. And the errors in that execution and the timing were my own.
Yeah.
My own hubris, thinking that this is such a good idea, everyone's going to like it.
I know.
It's a bit like with music, and I do songs, you know, I think this is a great song, you know, I'm going to put it on, everyone's going to think, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And you'll say, no, it's not my kind of cup of tea. Oh, I don't like that. I like this kind of thing. I don't like that. Say, oh, but it's like, yeah, it's good. I'm sure you like it, but someone likes it, but it's not me, you know.
Yeah. You know, there's usually this sense I get sometimes when I think of my own ideas. It's kind of similar to how people say your child is always the most beautiful child in the world until other people see your child. They disagree. So in a way, our ideas are like our children. And we build them in our heads, and the whole world is going to love them.
Yes, exactly.
And one can call that naivety or stupidity or ignorance. Or do you think being naive and being stupid, you said you were stupid in that time, do you think that encourages your bravery? What's the role of naivety when you are breaking boundaries and doing things that no one's done before?
So I think absolutely you're 100% correct. And this goes back to the heart of what we're talking about, and why we say cheers to failure. Because you need that naivety and that human things like that kind of like passion, that kind of thing, to do those things, to break those things, and for them and to have those failures. Because otherwise you'll never learn. If you spend your whole life from a position of being just cautious and always saying, no, you know what I mean, I'm not going to do that. I mean, who am I to think that? Who am I to achieve that? or think that I can achieve that. Some of the things you say, I believe in this, I've got to push it. And take the chance. You've got to take the risks. You know what I mean? Honestly, if you don't take the risks, you'll achieve nothing, basically. So that's why we're going back to the thing. This is why failure is so important. It's better to take the risk and fail and learn and try again, basically, than to actually not take the risk and then spend your rest of your life saying, you know, I wish I'd done that idea, you know what I mean? Because it was a good idea and I could have done it. Now everyone's doing it and making money. It could have been me. Well, no, it couldn't be you because you didn't do it.
Didn't do it. Yeah. How do you make decisions when you don't have all the data you need? In navigating the story, and sometimes for me, I talk about leading in the gray.
Yeah.
That as a leader, you still need to push forward, but you might have incomplete information.
Yeah.
If you think about the information you needed when you needed it to make some of the decisions that you didn't make. How did you navigate that time?
I mean, I think one navigates on your. There's a couple of elements that come into it. There's obviously instinct and your own intuitions, which I think are important to believe to pay attention to. But I think instinct and intuition needs to always be kind of like balanced with experience, and I think that. Experience is the key thing. And that's why, again, why failure is so important, because the most experienced people are people that have failed and learned and moved on. Not people who haven't, you know what I mean? I've heard a story about people, investors say, when you say you've got an idea, the first thing they say, well, it's just a good idea. How many times have you failed before you got to this point? And you say, well, I haven't. They'll say, well, go back and fail a few times and come back and talk to me afterwards. But the thing is that... so experience is the important element to help you do that. So unfortunately, experience doesn't come ready-made the same package as attitude and intuition. Basically, it's a separate package, and that actually comes through time. And so, and in that moment there, because I mean, at that point, you know, I'd been over 20 years at that point in the industry. I knew a lot. I had a lot of things, so I did have a lot of things, but so I used that experience to kind of navigate it and make things happen and keep things going to a certain point. But I allowed my kind of hubris, my naivety, or my attitude and intuition to kind of get the better of me in a way, instead of saying to me, like, you know, hang on a second, you know. The experience to say, think about this, and I remember actually some people even saying, like, you know, but we thought about this, and I said, no, this is going to work. This is going to work. Trust me.
In my guts, my belly.
I've been in this business for a while. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So, what do you say to people? There's people who would say things like, how the people who are innovative, they create things before the market knows they need them.
Yeah.
We didn't know we needed music on our phones until you know, Apple put them on the phone. But sometimes that is another trap in the, you don't know people are going to need music on their phones. So what's the balance that you apply now of being sure that the need exists, the market exists, and balancing that with your intuition, your understanding, and your assessment of the opportunities and gaps in your market?
I think that's an incredibly interesting question, and I'm just thinking about it as you're talking about it. And I think the things with intuition and gut feel and all of that, in a way, is that if you looked at something, what it is you want to do, and if you look at it as a kind of like a ball, basically, and the thing about it is that your intuition and your kind of instinct kind of have they're kind of a one-dimensional kind of focus. What experience should give you is to be able to look at is to say, okay, this is where I see it from intuitively. I see it like that. But what's on the other side? I need to have, you know what I mean? So you need to kind of, you know, step back. You say, okay, this is great. And then, you know, so it's an interrogation, I suppose. You need to start learning to interrogate your intuitive and your attitude more directly, and think about it, and start, as I said. So if that thing is a ball, start looking at that ball as a whole, rather than it's about rather than a flat Earth, but you know, you got to look at the planet, look at the whole planet, and that's what experience can do. Experience can give you an idea of what might be on the other side of that, and you need to find those tools. And I think that there's just no there's no substitute for like research and hard work, basically. And also, I think the other key thing is to not be scared to face contrary views, basically, to people who say to you, this is a stupid idea. Is to, rather than say, no, I've been here, I know what I'm talking about, to say, okay, can you tell me why it's a stupid idea? And interrogate that thing and consider it. I think that's also one of the, you talk about the things I learned. I think that is the other thing I've learned a lot more, basically, is to understand that when people disagree with you or they say, no, this is not right, I just, your thinking isn't right. And it's not to say, well, I'm offended. You know what I mean? What do you know? You know what I mean? And
take offense to it.
Take offense to it, exactly. Is to say, okay, why do they say that? What's the point of view? Where are they coming from? Are they right? Maybe they're right. Maybe I need to look at it and explore that. And I think that is, it's good to come back to your gut feeling and your intuition, but you need to come back to it once you've reinforced it with a lot of critical thinking.
Sure. I want to understand now the way you do things in 2025, given the pound experience and the dollar experience you had. How has that shaped how you assess ideas you believe in today?
Yeah, well, I think that I've, as I said, I've learned to step back on my initial ideas, the thoughts about that, and not just kind of take it as at face value as the way you kind of the initial burst of enthusiasm you have about it, and then put it aside, and in fact not actually rush into it, and you must almost leave it there and say, okay, let me go away in a sense and come back to it again and look at it again. And in that time of being away from it and coming back to it and look at it again, I think the key thing is not to rush into that. And I think that the other thing is it's a bit like the old corny old SWOT diagrams, basically. It is important, you know what I mean, is to, you know what I mean, the weaknesses are as important to understand as the strengths. And you know what I mean, and I think that is the key thing. I think the first question you have to ask yourself when you get a good idea is to say, what's wrong with this idea? Why is this a bad idea? There must be some, it goes back to this sounds too good to be true when it usually is, basically. So if this sounds too good, why is it too, you know what I mean? Why might it not be as good as it seems? And go into it. And I think, so that's the thing, is to almost like start with the negative and then build your way back to the positive again,
Yeah.
And if you get back to the positive after that, you think, okay, I must be onto something here.
Yeah. How did you deal with, I'm going to call it trauma. How do you deal with the trauma of losing money and big amounts of money? I mean, to lose in rands is huge. To sell your stocks at Naspers, to bet everything you have, to move countries, to begin to live in pounds, to get investments in dollars, and to try and sell a product for $100 and be offered $20 for it. All of it is just like, it's like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It couldn't be easy to sleep at night knowing that.
No, it's been, and the fact of the matter is that I've still actually, the fallout of that is still, I still live with that fallout, basically. At that point in time, if I had just said, okay, well, if Multi-Choice Africa and SuperSport are going to pull out, become less involved with the rest of Africa and going back to being a more South African based thing, and my role becomes a bit more redundant. They might have moved me back to Joburg and some other office because in your corporate they'll find somewhere else for you to do. But it's not what I signed up for. But if I just stayed with that, stuck it out for another 10 years, considering that the pension, the shareholder payouts and everything like that, honestly, you know what I mean? We wouldn't be talking here right now, and I'd probably be in a very, very different situation.
You'll be in your private jet somewhere.
Well, not a private jet, but I certainly would be very, very comfortable.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, I am sitting here talking to you, which is an incredibly interesting experience. And at the same time, is that it meant that I've had to, instead of being able to say, okay, well, after after a further 10 years there, say, sort of walk out with a whole big payout and live a comfortable life and do what I want to do. I've been forced to go back into the market and do things and still be engaged in this media space. And actually, I'm in a space right now at a time where it is really being interesting. There's such the media space as a whole, and hard expect sport in particular, is going through a massive change, and it's dynamic. And I'm suddenly find myself at the kind of almost like playing a key role in it, with a lot of people, a lot of companies and things like that coming to me and saying, we need to know more about this. We need to be engaged with this. We need to. How do we actually get into this into the space? Because the old barriers are, you're a broadcaster, you're a mobile company, you're a bank, you're a car manufacturer, you're whatever it is like that. A lot of those things are all breaking down.
Yeah.
Banks are now becoming mobile companies.
Yeah.
Telcos are becoming media companies. They're all, everything is shifting, and it's because of the way that the technology, and the digital technology and everything is changing all of these things. So, and I'm in the middle of all of this process, basically, and it's exciting, and frankly, it's much better than just sitting and waking up every morning and sitting on a balcony and looking at the sea and having a cup of coffee, and then wondering what the hell am I going to do the rest of my day.
Definitely. Do you ever feel like almost taking revenge, or kind of saying, look at me now, I've come back, I've come back bigger, wiser, better, stronger. Come see my bank account now. I mean, it's
no, you don't want to see my bank account. No, it's not. I'm not there yet, basically. But
almost. But I mean, there's this whole thing. Like, I know when people fail, that their coming back is a big moment of almost, I would say, correcting perceptions, showing what you can do, and how that you've got more wins than losses, and it's possible to win again.
I think that probably one of the other thing I've learned from that is not to do that, because I find that all the time. It's like being a fan of a football team, is that, and I see it all the time, or any sports team basically, is that when you're winning, everybody wants to go like, look at us, we're like, and laughing at everybody. And then suddenly 6 months later, you're like getting kicked around. The other guys are thinking, and so what you learn from that is like that. So take the kicks when you're down, and when you're at the top, don't make an issue out. Don't boast about it.
Be humble.
Because be humble.
Be humble.
Be humble and appreciate the fact that you actually are what you are. Because it's been deserved, and whatever you've achieved, you've learned from that. Because there's nothing worse than trying to say, look what I did, and I came back and like that. I think it's good enough to say that I'm here. I'm still doing what I want to do. I'm still living a very, very exciting and challenging life that is positive. I've got the space to work on my music on the side as well, which is, other people play golf, I do music, and I still can do that.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very happy in it. And it's still challenging. And it's not as though I've now gone back and made a huge pile of money, and it's all very, very good. But I'm very comfortable, and I'm doing experiences that I love. I'm going to spend. My partner is an academic, and she's got a 2 months research fellowship at the Edinburgh University coming up in Scotland in December and January. So I'm going to go and spend 2 months in Scotland, and with her we can do some traveling around there as well, and seeing friends and things. And that's great. I can do that. The fact that I can actually do that is, you know what I mean. That's brilliant.
That's
you know
beautiful,
what I mean. I don't want to say, well, look, now I have a private jet or whatever like that. No, I want to know that I can just have a nice life, and I can play, put my band together now and then, do some music, do those kinds of things, and be happy. And you know what I mean. I think, if anything, I think, and it should be for people, when you do fail, be humble about, you know what I mean. Accept that it's a humbling experience, and that whatever successes that might come thereafter, they can disappear as well, basically, and you can find yourself back down. Life's a roller coaster.
That's true. So let's talk to those who play the role of being one's inner circle, and the support they need to give to those who are experiencing a failure.
Yeah.
What would you guide the inner circle to do? Because I know sometimes that's the most critical support one needs when they're struggling. If I am supporting a friend who is going through a bet that they made it
Yeah.
and it not succeeding,
Yeah.
what would you say I should show up as, or the questions I should ask to help my friend?
I think it's also, again, it's a very, very interesting question as well, because I think it's very important. And I think that people maybe don't understand how important that it really is, actually, because you need the people around you to be there for you. And I think that is the important thing. I think one of the first things is that you realize in those moments who your friends really are, basically. And what your friends do is they stick with you on those things. They don't, but the thing is, not to actually ever try and say, well, even if you thought that the failure, you could see where the failure was, is to say, oh no, you had such a good idea, it was other people's faults and everything like that, and just try and make them be condescending about it. Is you know what I mean? If you see, say, you should have actually seen that, and that was a mistake that you made. And I think that the thing is to actually make them appreciate that their failure is not to take it like personally. Take it as a part of that learning process, and speak to their strengths. Say, but you are a good person. You've got some great ideas, and you know what I mean. You know what I mean. We just need to kind of reapproach this differently. You need to find other ways to look at it, and see what else is it, and just try and understand why I'm just trying to help them understand why they failed. I think, because that way they'll have more opportunity to learn from it, and they will appreciate that in the long run. Because if you work with them on that in that way, and they pick things up, they'll see you as that person that helped them pick themselves up and go. Condescending to people and saying, "Oh no, you're a brilliant person," and these other people are idiots. What do they know? You know what I mean? Yeah. You're not helping that person in any kind of way at all. It's not what a real friend does. A real friend says, you made a mistake. And this is why I think you made the mistake. But you know what I mean? You've got the ability and you know what you should be doing to get over that.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, last question is, given your proximity to sports and how, all athletes deal with failure and, and winning, but everybody's familiar with what it feels like and psychologically what it takes. If you were to use that experience to guide parents who need to raise children who are failure ready, equipped to navigate their lives as children, because failure happens to them, and failure happens to all of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
How would you guide parents to prepare their children for failure?
I think, firstly, it's an important thing to exactly that, is that you need to prepare kids for failure. And I worry a lot about the younger generations, is that there's too much of a space offered to children growing up to feel that there's actually that, failure is not an option, but not that it's not an option. Failure, that the idea that there's no such thing as failure.
It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Yes.
This idea. So it's like, you always laugh about it, basically, but it's like at schools, where the person that comes last in the race basically still gets a certificate for participation, and and you think to yourself, is that really doing them any good, or is it just a real slap in the face, basically, because then because they've got to be I think motivation is the key thing, and motivation doesn't come from saying, okay, well, you failed, but that was good enough, basically. You need to understand. I think the main thing is that what you've got to do as parents is to help your kids understand what they're capable of. And you've got to say, okay, well, you came last in that race, but it's not what you want to do. It's not your thing. Don't feel that because you failed to win that race that you're a failure. No, you're just a failure in running, basically. But it doesn't mean you're a failure in maths or a failure in something, or it means other things that are important. What are your strengths? And help them focus on their strengths and be less concerned about not succeeding at the things that don't matter, or that they are clearly it's not their strengths, basically.
Yeah. And then last, how do you prepare for 2026? What's your routine? What's your routine for ending the year and beginning a new one?
Well, as I said,
what's the Gary method?
The Gary. Well, I think the best thing to do is to switch down, is really power down at the end of the year. Basically, one has to do that. Particularly if you're working in a very, very high pressured or challenging environment, you need to do that. If you keep on throwing too many things, or you keep on chasing too many things, you lose focus. And if you're in a pressurized environment, you're forced to chase a lot of things. So you do get thrown off. You need to actually power down, clear your mind, and get a clean slate ready for the year ahead, basically. I think that's really, really key. And I think I see too many people that are trying to rush around, achieve too many things. And I think if that's one thing I have also learned over the years, because I've been like that in my life, you say, well, I can do all these things. I can do this. Yes, I can do that. I can write that article. I can design that cover. I can actually, do that bicycle race. I can do all those things. But you ask yourself, do you really? Yes, of course you can. But do you really need to do all those things? What are the things that you really, really need to do, and just focus on those things? So sometimes, in your environments where you have to do a lot of those things, so it's important to switch off, power down, and then start up again, power up again, and see, okay, let's look at the year ahead. What are the key things that I need to actually focus on this year? And really make that's your focus, and trying to keep the other things that you can do, you might like to do, but are really relevant, and trying to keep them at bay, basically. Only give space to them if space opens up for them, basically.
Well, that's it, Gary. That's cheers to failure.
Well,
and we talked about it.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, it was very, very good. I thought it was, for a cheers to failure, I thought it was very successful.
Yeah.